Into the Nexus is a production of amove.tv. Bookmark Amove TV for other great video games and esports podcasts. Into the Nexus is sponsored by listeners like you via patreon.com/ITN. Greetings and welcome back, everyone, to Into the Nexus, the podcast all about Heroes of the Storm. I'm Garrett, here with Kyle, and also NotParadox. Why is NotParadox returning so soon after only being on a week or 2 episodes ago? Well, that's because today we're going to be talking drafting. We've heard from a lot of Into the Nexus listeners, a lot of Heroes of the Storm players out there, that y'all want a refresher, a deep dive into what you should be thinking about when you go into the draft. We've also, just last episode, took an email from someone who asked about dealing with ladder anxiety. And while Kyle, you and I had a lot of different little tips for this person, at the end of the day, if you just arm yourself with knowledge, that's going to be probably the best thing you could possibly do to combat ladder anxiety.
This is the meat episode for drafting that you've all requested for a long time. It looks like we're going to be in that sort of long BlizzCon meta here, at least a month, maybe 2, maybe waiting on that December patch. So there's no better time to lock in with our buddy NotParadox and just let it go. We got some phases we're going to work through here. Phases of the draft that we're going to follow. We're going to talk about doing it solo style. Then we're going to get up to what that might be like with your friends.
Yes, indeed. We're going to talk about drafting solo and drafting with friends because the conversation goes in different directions depending on your level of coordination. So it's going to be a meaty topic. So before we get into it today, we do want to thank the folks supporting us over at patreon.com/ITN. If you like Into the Nexus, if you like the knowledge bombs that we drop on this here podcast and you want to support it, want to keep it coming, want to help us keep the lights on, patreon.com/ITN is the best way to do so. And it really, every little bit helps. You know, we've got producers. We love them. They're great. They're like tanking for all of us with their big backings of Into the Nexus. But every little bit helps. It really does. And we can't thank you enough. And that's why we get to do things like special episodes like this, like Patron Bonanzas, answer questions in that Discord, everything else. So check it out, patreon.com/ITN. And to some of our most recent patrons, thank you to Richard K. Thank you to Threescapes. I like that name. I don't know what it means, but I like it. And Robert R. Thank you for the support, everyone. Threescapes. Yeah, it's a fun name.
Yeah, I like that name.
It's like, I don't know. You like is your landscaping like part of a lawn, part rock, and part sand?
I don't know why it reminds me. There was this old board game that was like, it got really popular for a bit called Heroescape. And I don't know why it reminds me of that so much because like you build these like landscapes for your heroes and and like if you for each amount of players you'd build something else. And like we used to call, if we had like 3 people, we would be like, it's a threescape. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like we had 3 different landscapes all at once. No, I don't know. Cool. I have no idea where that name comes from. That's a cool name though. Sorry to derail
maybe
that.
It's your friend who knows exactly what that is.
Maybe it is. Maybe I know this guy in real life. Josh, is that you? Because no, I have no idea.
Let us know. So thanks for the support, everybody. And now let's get into the first topic of this discussion, which is drafting solo. And this is, I mean, drafting really is. This is like an obvious statement, but I like bringing it up. It's the game before the game. You got to, if you're going into a draft environment, you have to play a game before you actually get into the game of Heroes of the Storm and control a character.
No, very true. And it's funny because there was this there was a Discord channel for a while where people would learn the game and teach each other the game. And there was this little mini game that people used to play where they would try out different drafts. And I remember Fun Buns, he's one of the competitive players. He's on a couple different teams. He used to go on there and he would like judge them. So you would say like, oh, I'm going to ban this, you ban this, you ban this, blah, blah, blah. And at the end of it, it'd go, yeah, this player won. And it was like, it was its own game in itself. And it's kind of true. It's like, there are some things that can happen in a draft that pretty much determines a good 70% of the game. Outside of something crazy happening, it could easily determine the game. So it certainly is its own game.
Yeah. So if you're out there and you're listening and you have never drafted in Heroes of the Storm before, really what I kind of always mention is, have you been in quick match? Have you ever thought to yourself, boy, there was just nothing we could do against this composition we found ourselves against. What horrible luck in quick match. That is what drafting is for. Drafting is there to mitigate that sense of hopelessness in the face of a perfect, like, just stomp comp. And we get to ban, we get to pick. You can ban through picking. We're going to talk about all of that, but let's start at the most basic level. When you're sitting there, you've never drafted before, you're thinking to yourself, maybe I'm ready. How, gentlemen, do you know that you're ready to draft?
That's a good one. I would say that the first thing that you should be doing if you're switching from like quick match to unranked and you just want to start getting some more normal games, is have one person, at least one hero in every role, in case you get shoved into a role that's not your main hero. So your main hero is Rexar and you want to play Rexar all the time. You should at least have one hero for everything, but try to like show people that you'd like to play Rexar, but then have one thing for every role in case something happens, that's by far your number one thing. And then I always recommend a second hero in the main role that you want to play. So say your main is Rexar and Rexar gets banned and you were hovering Rexar. Because you were hovering Rexar, your team probably still thinks that you're going to be playing solo lane. So you need to have a backup in whatever your main role is. So as long as I recommend you should have probably about 5 to 7 heroes really strong before you go into unranked, just so that they don't need to be like, if you're going into unranked, it's okay to still learn things. But it should be relatively okay before getting in there. So like 5 to 7 heroes is where the requirements are like 16 heroes or something, but 5 to 7, so you can at least hover and make sure you're in a good spot.
I like unranked for learning a lot because I think there's quite a few heroes in this game that are pretty difficult to learn in a quick match environment unless you just get lucky and you get a comp.
Completely agree. Yeah, I completely agree.
But yeah, the only time I learn a quick match is with friends, so we can have some control over our composition.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times people learn some really bad habits in quick match. A lot of heroes that work really well in quick match, like Nova, for example, works great in quick match because things are chaotic. Most people don't go for camp, so Bribe gets a ton of value. A lot of times you play games without tanks or healers, so without healers, you just kind of play a pokey version of Nova, and without tanks, everyone's squishy, so you can just blow up anyone. So like Nova's amazing in quick match, and then she's like useless in Storm League.
Well, no,
so it's like
there you have like a powerhouse in the current gamescape with Zul'jin in draft mode, but in quick match, oh my goodness, does that guy suffer?
Oh, he's rough. It's real rough because it's like you have no front line to get stacks off of because there's so many times you'll get games without tanks. So it's like he's really rough in quick match. So I really wouldn't recommend. I think there was a HEC coach, Cavalier Guest. He explained it the best, and he said Heroes of the Storm is actually split into 2 completely different games. He says there's quick match and there's drafting, and he said quick match is it's a completely different game. Like you should be able to download them separately. He's like, they're that different. He's like, there should be Heroes of the Storm quick match and there should be Heroes of the Storm. And he said they play completely different and they have different rosters, different metas, different everything. He's like, he goes, ARAM is closer to Heroes of the Storm than quick matches. And it was just funny how he explained it. It's kind of true. It's like they're very, very different games. But yeah, getting into draft, I would recommend 5 to 7 heroes. And then feel free to use unranked for as long as you want to learn the game before you hit that Storm League button.
And if you're not enjoying the decorating process, you should be going to your profile and roster. And you got these little favorite bars you can load up in there. And maybe I just like collecting my sweet rolls in Skyrim, but I am constantly adjusting this thing.
I usually that's also another thing I like to recommend when people are getting started, to just favorite out like 7 heroes, so that it's like, those are always there. There was a there is a thing that I was using favorites for a while, because I happen to be banning a lot, because I usually would play with friends that are lower rank. So I happen to be banning a lot. So I just favorited out like the most common bans, so I didn't need to search for them. Do you need to do that? No, but that's just another trick for the favorites. At the bare minimum, you can always just do that.
Nice little tip.
Because I couldn't spell my Ev and I always wanted to ban her. So
I've had that problem. I always do. I feel like I used to have that problem with the butcher. But I think it happens more on fan sites, because it doesn't come up when you just start typing butcher. You have to do which just drives me crazy. But and so, all right, 5 to 7 heroes. Let's help folks pick those heroes if they're trying to think about their roster. I guess start with, are there any heroes we feel are must-haves or must practice?
I think a lot of the easier heroes in the game are probably surprisingly more meta than people think. As far as tanks go, if I was just asking you guys, what are like the easiest tanks? If you could name 2, right? 2 of the easiest tanks.
Tank-wise, Johanna just runs the top of my list.
Yep. And what else? Second easiest tank.
That's where I start to go. It depends.
It does. I mean, I would usually say like Johanna and ETC, right? And right now they are literally like 2 of the best tanks in the game. They're very easy to learn. I think that there's a lot of nuances to both of them that can make it to where you can go really, really deep into how they should be played, but they're both very easy to learn, very easy mechanics. Then the next, like, most important role, in my opinion, is probably healer. Easiest healer, Lily. Surprisingly competitive for what she is. The rest of the healers can get pretty tricky, but I do think everyone should have a Lily in their roster if they don't have another healer that they want to learn. I find that Stukov, once you get the basic ideas of him, he's pretty easy, but I would say Lucio is my next one that I would recommend everyone have. So Lily, Lucio, they're just very straightforward, very easy to play, and they just have a lot of impact in the game. Solo lane is the next one, I think, is a must. I think a lot of people get caught up on the bruiser aspect, but there's a lot of solo laners that are really strong. If you've learned ETC, you just need to learn a different play style of ETC, and suddenly you have a global hero, one of the best global heroes, in fact. But if you just want a basic solo laner that's easy to learn, easy to play, and can be picked at any time, is Thrall. He just works with a lot of different things. I would recommend picking up Thrall. I think everyone needs a physical damage dealer, like a ranged physical damage dealer. Rainer, super easy to play, very inexpensive. Most of the heroes that I'm going to mention are also inexpensive too. So if you're new to the game, which I don't know if this is the official title of the episode, but on the thing you put Noobisode. So for new players, if you're listening, these are all inexpensive heroes. Joanna's 4,000, ETC's 2,000, Lily's 2,000, Lucio maybe 7,000 actually. Someone might be a little
Lucio's
expensive.
Still kind of up there, but
yeah, Thrall is 4,000, Rainer's 2,000. Then we get into the mages, the spell damage, and I always recommend Jaina by far out of any of them. She's a little bit trickier because her range is low. So if you want to practice someone with higher range, Kael'thas, again, 2,000 gold, 4,000 gold. And I like to separate those. I like to have a role for physical damage and a role for spell damage. And I'll explain a little bit why later. And then finally, I have a utility. I don't think anyone should be putting a utility hero as priority. They tend to be heroes that you sneak in based off of what the needs of your team is, maybe some counter pick, something like that. But a utility hero that you might want to look at is Abathur. It brings in a lot if you need something like that. Tassadar, again, they kind of fill out different things that your team might need. But overall, I really wouldn't recommend them as something that you should be like prioritizing. So that's a by far secondary. But those are the roles that I think exist in the game as it is right now, is tank, heals, solo lane, physical damage, spell damage, and utility. So I always recommend having the first 5 roles that I mentioned, one of each, because every team is going to need one of each with very few exceptions. I don't really consider like Bruiser, because like my problem with Bruiser versus solo lane is you can run ETC as a solo laner and it would still be just as good. You don't need a Bruiser, and you can run Falstad as a solo laner and it'd be just as good. And that is its own role. If you were put in the solo lane, you should learn all of those heroes, because if your friends want you to always be in the solo lane, you can't just limit it to Bruisers, which is why I think that there's a lot of overlap between the roles.
Yeah, I think that's why I have been so drawn to it in the last year is the flexibility that it affords you once you have that realization that not all bruisers are solo laners, but there's a lot of heroes in every category we just talked about that are solo laners.
Oh yeah, definitely solo lane has like the biggest overlap, but I do think that there's just a lot of confusion at where all the roles fit. And I think that's why like someone came up with the idea before all the role swaps happened, before all the role changes. Someone came up with an idea and they're like, why, instead of doing roles, why don't we do traits? Where like, oh, you have a trait that's solo lane, you have a trait that's healer, you have a trait that's whatever. Because right now, like Uther, for example, in the competitive scene isn't used as a healer, he's used as a solo laner or a tank. And it would be interesting to have like those traits put on there so that people don't get confused where they see healer and they're like, oh, there's a healer, that means that this person can main heal. And it's like, well, not really. So it'd be interesting if they had like burst heal or they had sustain heal, or just like little traits so people can kind of know what they're getting into. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of where all of those fit for me, is those like 6 roles. But I don't know. But so I'd recommend that. I'd recommend those heroes to start off. Anything that's inexpensive. There's a couple bait heroes that are a little inexpensive that I wouldn't recommend for players, like Asmodan. It's like a 2,000 gold hero. Diablo, 2,000 gold hero. Diablo for me is too easy to charge in, die, and not know what went wrong when you're first learning. So I don't usually recommend him. I would say, what's his name? Asmodan, same thing. It's too easy to like top all the charts and then still not win the game and not know what went wrong. So that's why I don't usually recommend Asmodan or Diablo, despite the fact that they're both 2,000 gold.
Yeah, I do the same thing with Vala. I tend to not recommend Vala to newer players because she's so volatile in her.
Yeah, I agree.
her capability of dying very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, what do you guys add to that list? What other heroes would you guys recommend for like new players or just staples that everyone should have in their roster?
I really like your Jaina suggestion. It's such a uphill battle because that range is so short and Kael'thas is so rewarding. But Kael'thas is going to get banned out in the majority of your bell curve middle leagues. And that just means you don't have another mage to bring to the table. And after Jaina, things start getting weird and dependent on the type of healer and everything you have. I would like to add to this, have a camp taker, but that's not quite true. What we should say instead is across your roster, you need to know which heroes can do a camp. Yeah. And if there's a level where that suddenly comes online, there are heroes that are just mana inefficient, just taking way too long, like Jaina. And then all of a sudden, you hit 7 and you're going to bust through that siege camp real fast.
Oh yeah, I actually have like a list for things that I think every team needs. I have like 5 major things every team needs, and I've got like 4 minor things that I always tell teams that I'm coaching. And I think this is where a lot of teams that like struggle when they start losing games as groups of 5 and they don't know why. It's usually pretty obvious to say you're missing one of these 9 things, and Cam Clear is one of those. I have Wave Clear, Cam Clear, Burst damage, sustain damage, and CC. Those are the 5 things every single team needs, hands down. And it's usually easier to get than people think, but you'll be surprised when you don't get it. And if you don't know that these are the 5 things that you need and you don't get it, you'll lose. And if you don't know those things, you'll be screwed. But it's easier to get than people think. For example, if you just had a Jaina and an ETC, you actually fill out everything. you have wave clear, you have cam clear, you have burst, you have sustained damage, and you have CC, which is 2 heroes. So it's a lot easier to get than people think, but then sometimes you might get a game where you just don't have any of it. You're running a Mephisto for 1 of your damage. You're running a Cassia for 1 of your damage. You've got let's say let me think about this difference. So you've got Lunara and Mephisto, and then you have like your tank is a Tyrael, and suddenly you only have sustained damage, you have no burst, and you have no CC, and then you're just screwed. And it's you can't ever hold people down. You get them low, they walk away, and there's nothing you can do, and you just lose every single fight. So it's hard to miss out on all 5 of those things. But when you do, it's something it's pretty much a guaranteed loss versus a team that does have them. And then I have like the 4 mini things that I think every team should look at, which is siege damage, poke, setup, and follow up. Where just a little bit of CC is usually enough to set up. Something like a Maiev that can set up really, really well, right? Like Maiev can go in, she can pull 4 people, then put an ult down, and then they all get pulled back in like 3 times. That's an amazing setup that is going to lead to amazing team fights. And follow up, something that can, even something as simple as a Malfurion root, she pulls everything in, everyone on the enemy team in, they all get rooted, and then they all get silenced. It's like, that's enough to end out the fight. If you have a great setup, now you've got a great follow-up. So those are things that can really, like, the first thing is like, if your team doesn't have all 5 of those, you just lose. But the second thing is, if you have all 4 of the next things, then you can really win. If you have a lot of siege damage and you win a team fight, you take a keep for free. You know, that's why it's so important to have that. Poke allows you to stall out objectives for a long time. So if you lose a team fight, you can poke it out until everyone's back. And then you win a team fight. If the enemies don't have poke, then you win even further. So that's why the first 5 are necessary. The second 4 just allow you to, like, when you finally get ahead, you just stay ahead forever.
So the genius of what you just said is, you know, for anyone new to this game or new to drafting, we just did about 2 minutes of techno babble, because that might be beyond you at the moment. But what NotParadox recommended in the 5 main roles, with what you said about ETC and Jaina, supplies those bonus roles we just talked about. So by having Thrall instead of other strange, bizarre solo laner, you are supplying what your team needs in the basic mode. Jaina, not Mephisto.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, is like, there are a lot of good heroes that just don't fill out enough of these pieces, that if you put too many of them together, you're just going to lose. And it could be kind of difficult to see why you lost. And that's what I've had of, like, I've coached teams that are around like Division C, which, if you don't know what Division C is, it's a term given to a team based off of where they are placed in the Nexus Gaming Series, a small amateur tournament. And that usually puts people in Division C if they're around, I would say, gold-ish. And so a bunch of players that are around gold, they lose a game, they don't know why, they send it to me, and I go, well, you're just missing burst damage. Like, everyone gets low and they walk away, they heal up, they come back into the fight. Then when your team gets low, you get bursted. And it's like, so then you're missing someone for the rest of the fight. And then I said, it's kind of same thing. Like, you guys don't have enough wave clear, you don't have enough cam clear. I think when you're moving up in rank, and this is why I like to bring these up, is even in solo queue, and this is the section we're in right now. If you're moving up in rank, you want to try to pick a hero that can do the majority of these things, so that you don't need to worry about your team trying to fill in the pieces that are missing.
Yeah,
so,
we talk a lot about like the positivity of selfish drafting when it comes to solo queue is having if you're confident in yourself and your own ability, you're leaving a lot less up to chance. And it's not us saying that you should enter every single draft with 0 faith in your team, but you should prepare for balls being dropped, so that if they aren't dropped, it's an easier game. But if they are, you can cover.
Yeah, I get in that mindset almost too much sometimes. I pick Joanna a lot of time while tanking, because she kind of does a little bit of everything. She does the most that one tank can do, and wave clear is the biggest one. And I want to say, like, all the way up to Masters, every single season, my Joanna win rate's like above 70%. And it's because I'll just cover 2 lanes, and it's almost therapeutic to just cover 2 lanes while your team's just doing nothing that they're supposed to be doing. And this one game I was playing, I was just covering it. I was covering it. And then finally, like, someone on my team started like pinging me a bunch. And it's weird because I always cover soak, and then I join my team for every objective. So it's not like I'm ever missing when my team needs me. We always fight over every objective in every major camp. Someone was pinging me a bunch. I'm like, man, I've been at every objective. I said, we've won every objective. We're 2 levels ahead of the enemy. I'm like, why are you mad? And he's like, I'm not getting any stacks. And I looked and I was like, oh, he's in a Zebo. We're level 16. The enemies are level 14. And he's got 12 stacks. And I'm like, I've been clearing all the lanes too fast. He can't catch up. But I'm like, but we're also 2 levels ahead. I just told him, like, just pick something different at level 20. We're fine. Let's just win this game.
Well, to what I would tell everyone else listening, if you get to that point, cool. That's an awesome problem to have.
Yeah.
For you.
Yeah, but I was
selfishly.
like, yeah, it's like, that's kind of what, like, if you just want to, because so many people miss wave clear, and here's the storm. Wave clear is by far the most important thing you could be doing, I would say, before level 13. You need to be at every objective because objectives will allow you to get a lot more value than wave clearing. But most of the time during objectives, you can still wave clear to an extent. If you're on, let's say, I mean, if you guys actually listed all the maps here, I'll just go down really quick. Like all track pass, you win the objective, you're going to be clearing lanes throughout that. Braxis holdout, you're going to be clearing lanes throughout the entire objective. Cursed Hollow, you're going to be away from lanes for a while, but once you win the objective, you're going to be clearing lanes. Dragon Shire, you're gonna be clearing lanes during the objective. Hanamura, you're gonna be clearing lanes during the objective. Like, there's so many things that, like, you still clear lanes, but by far, if there's no objective up, every wave needs to be soaked. Then you only need one person soaking every lane. That's when you start spreading people out to go get the camps, to go get other things, while vision, whatever, while your team is already soaking every lane. But what happens a lot of times, and I would say every single rank, is that there are a lot of waves missed. And if you just catch all the waves that are missed, you can literally get 2 to 3 levels above the enemies every single game, which is more damage that your team does, more talents that your team has. I mean, it's so by far
supplying that Johanna and that Jaina, you're not only giving a solid person with all these goals, you're actually going to lane clear faster, more effectively.
Oh yeah,
meaning those other heroes that might be weird and not part of this perfect Paradox plan can go take a merc camp, can go fart off on the objective and not.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think like some of them that are. Let me try to think of like Genji, I would say, is a great example of a hero that doesn't have wave clear, doesn't have great camp clear, doesn't have CC, doesn't have sustained damage. He literally only has burst, right? And it's not even that great of burst. So looking at my list, you'd be like, oh, you should just never draft Genji. But he's actually a pretty good hero in a lot of situations. It's just that you need to make sure that you have all of those other things before you're like, all right, it's time to add in something like a Genji, you know? Same with like Li Ming. Like, her wave clear is not great. Her sustained damage isn't great. She doesn't have CC. Her camp clear isn't great. She just has burst. But she's still really good in very specific situations. And again, if you fill out all the rest of those things, it's like, you know what? It is time for Li Ming, you know, get those resets. So there's a lot of those that I think are great examples of heroes that might not fit a lot of these things, but
so
and as we just talked about, those things will come later. So yeah, as you recognize and use your game knowledge to execute an effective draft. So let's start going into the draft. So we got a roster. It's got those solid heroes on it. Early picks. And let's ignore bans. Very first, when you get into draft, it's going to ask for bans. That'll be one person's responsibility. You may not even know that person, and it could be heavily dependent on the current balance and meta.
Oh yeah, and let's say you're just getting into drafting and you get the ban hat, right? If they give it to you, the best thing that you can ever do is just ask your chat, your team, just go, hey guys, what do you guys recommend for bans? I would say 90% of the time, someone will have a couple recommendations. And that way, one, you're taking the stress off of you 2, you don't need to worry about the meta so much because they're going to help you with that. And 3, you're starting off in the good graces of your team because you're like, hey, what do you guys recommend? Oh, okay, I'll do what you guys recommend. And that person's going to be more likely to listen to your advice in the future. Just be like, hey, I'm going to run this. It would appreciate if I had something like this on our team.
It's worth bringing up because so many times you don't want to show weakness in these, strategy or competitive games. You're trying to be a strong, confident person, but somebody on your team may want to do Kel'Thuzad and they're like, ban Kairazim, and in your mind it makes no sense. Why would you want that? Just do it. Like, you are just making a friend. Yeah, and actually it's rather correct.
Yeah, banning is like the most common thing folks want to collaborate on in the chat, in games. I've seen this in all ranks, basically. Like, if anyone is actually open to having a conversation, it's about banning.
Oh yeah, and it's interesting because League of Legends is doing a different ban system from the last time that I played, and it makes sure each player gets one ban. So you get to choose like what counters what you're trying to do, and then because HOTS doesn't have that, I do think that's something that everyone, if you are worried about something on what you're playing, like what you said, Kel'Thuzad, ban Kairazim, it's like that makes sense. I mean, Kairazim can res whoever he tries to burst, and Kairazim can get 2 cleanses off. So that's something that Kel'Thuzad would be worried about. And same thing with a variety of these heroes. If you play one hero all the time, you're going to know what you don't want to see. But yeah, so communicate during the bans. And now we get into the early picks, right? And the cool part about the heroes that I mentioned earlier about heroes to pick up also are heroes that are pretty safe to early pick. Normally, your early picks should be one of 2 things. One, something that's really good on that map. That's, I think, the highest priority is if there's something that's good on that map. So if I was to say, let's go with Infernal Shrines, best heroes to pick immediately, what would you guys say?
On Infernal Shrines, we already mentioned Kael'thas should be on your roster. I like seeing a Kael'thas. I think he's good enough that anything you might be concerned of in the terms of counter picking or diving on top of the Kael'thas is worth the risk.
Sure. Kael'thas is good. I mean, so Infernal Shrines, let's break down the map, right? So yes, Kael'thas is great. I do like Kael'thas on that map. But let's break down the map. What are the pieces of Infernal Shrines that makes it different from every other map? Why? Like, what are we looking for on that map? What's the goal? What's the pieces that lead to that goal, right? So it's a map that has an objective that spawns at 3 minutes, like most other maps, except for Garden of Terror for whatever reason, 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Why? I don't know. It's got, what does the objective have? It has it spawns the little minions. You need 40 of them. They are considered monsters. Okay. For the people that are wondering why that matters, well, there are certain things that'll say does less damage to heroes, or there's something that might say does more damage to mercenaries. Because they are monsters, you need to find things that do something to monsters. The best example would be Hanzo's level 4 talent, Explosive Arrows, makes it explode when it hits a minion or a monster. So it will explode when you hit the little minion, the little enemies, little monsters. I believe there's skeletal warriors on that map. That is what you're going to be looking for, is talents that affect that. Now, because you need 40 of those and they all have health, what are good heroes that would help you win that objective? And that question's open.
Because if you go in there with just the Kael'thas, it's going to be extremely slow and painful because you're not going to kill them fast enough. They'll be slapping you.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why personally I still get really stoked on a Sonya on Infernal Shrines.
Sonya, if I ever have a Sonya on Infernal Shrines, that's usually my cue to let Sonya do the objective on her own while we get everything else on the map. Because she just does it so efficiently that she can pull a bunch of things together and then spin and melt them all down, and she gains back all of her life after each spin. So Sonya, I kind of adjust, but yeah, Sonya is a great hero for that map. In the competitive
it's
scene,
not something I think you're going to see all that often in a solo queue environment, though. I don't think the team is going to go, oh, we've got a Sonya. Sure, we trust her.
Exactly. But that's a great hero to pick up in case you're soloing on this objective, or you're solo queuing and you get Infernal Shrines and you're in the solo lane. You could be like, you know what? I'm gonna pull out Sonya. And in every lane, there's gonna be different examples. So if I'm playing healer on this map, I might go, okay, well, the objective usually lasts a little bit. We like AoE. We want my whole team's probably gonna be in this clustered area. Alexstrasza, right? You can bring out a dragon. The enemies have to walk away or else they're fighting into this giant dragon. And you can get like 15 to 25 of the little skeletons while the dragon's going. So I would be like Alexstrasza on this map. If I was playing a ranged damage dealer, let's say a physical damage dealer, I'd be looking for, like what Kyle said, something sustained that can last a long time. I'd look for like a Rainer, maybe even like a Greymane, just something that can just stay pretty safe, poking them down one by one. Tank, I would want something that could like either kill a bunch of the little minions or someone who could last that sustained fight. Joanna is really the best example of it. She pulls together minions for your team to take out. At the same time, her wave clear build, you can just wipe out all the minions. And she's very sustained. She has like laws of hope that keep her going, which is a level 1 talent that regens your life. Like that's what you would try to look for. Is you'd look for this objective is also on a pseudo timer, which means once one team hits 40, it's over. The objective's done, which is something that a lot of people don't think about with objectives, is the time that it takes to get an objective. If you're on Cursed Hollow, there's no timer on that objective. As long as you can poke the enemies is as long as it's going to take the enemies to get the objective. You can't do that on this one. Eventually they're going to get it, which is why it's a timed objective. For timed objectives, I like heroes like Alexstrasza, who has a timed ultimate ability that's really powerful for a short amount of time. Commandeer Odin, which is an ultimate ability from Tychus that has big AoEs, lasts a short duration. I like heroes like that. Any other hero, Archon from Tassadar, he's got AoE, and also he's got this big ultimate that lasts a short duration. Anything like that lasts a short duration, I love for Infernal Shrines, because by the time your ult's over, you probably have almost won the objective, and the enemies can't just walk away. If you're on Cursed Hollow and they pop Archon, Odin, and Dragon, you walk away and you have a Junkrat just slowly throw one bomb at a time, interrupting the thing until their ults are all gone, and then you just walk back in and win. So that's the big challenges on maps that have timed objectives. Those duration ults are very, very powerful.
Yeah, those power spikes.
Your early draft on that map should be one of the few things that we mentioned. Something that gets the objective, things that can easily kill the minion, something that has sustain that can last for those fights, or something that just can use some big thing that allows you to hold the point long enough to where you just win the objective. And that should be your early pick. So for me, in the competitive scene right now, the first things that are usually picked on Infernal Shrines is Hanzo, Junkrat, because they can take out the point from far away without needing to get in there. Then you have Kerrigan in very rare situations, because auto attack Q kills the minion and it resets your Q, and then you can Q auto attack, which then resets the minion, and Q auto attack and resets the minion, and Q auto attack, and before you know it, you can hop into an enemy area. Like there could be 3 enemies sitting on that point, and you can steal all of them away from the enemies with a giant shield on you and not take any damage and then walk away. So Kerrigan's one that gets picked up here and there. Joanna is really common on that map. So those are the things that you might want to look for. First, Alexstrasza, again, very common on that map. Then, if you don't know what is best in that, like you're looking at the map and you're like, I really don't know, don't try to get too crazy with it. Just pick something that you're comfortable with. And for early picks, you pick heroes. Like if no one's picking anything and you don't know, you always try to pick things that don't get countered very easily. If you ever play a hero and you feel like there's not really any heroes that really annoy you that much, that's a hero that doesn't really get countered that easily. Say you're playing Illidan and you get blinded, you're like, oh, this sucks, right? Like, or you play Illidan and you go against an Arthas and you're attacking super slow and you can't get away from him, you're like, this sucks. You're getting countered. But if you're playing like Joanna and you're like, there's nothing that really bothers me that much, that's a hero that doesn't have a lot of counters. Usually heroes that don't have a lot of counters are also heroes that aren't really like that powerful. Like they don't like, no one's really like, oh my gosh, they picked this hero, everything sucks. Like Sergeant Hammer. Someone picks a Sergeant Hammer and you're like, this sucks. They've got a Sergeant Hammer. But Sergeant Hammers are usually like easily countered by something else. If you're playing something that hits the field and you're like, oh, whatever, they've got a Joanna, that's not a big deal. Those are also usually the heroes that don't have a lot of counters. They don't do anything really well, but they also aren't countered by anything really well.
And that's an important note to this whole conversation, right? Because everything we've been talking about here is how to make an informed decision based on how the draft is going. But what if it's the first pick of the game and nobody's showing anything? You haven't seen any picks made, and your teammates aren't showing what they would like to pick. So it's always, I'm glad you brought that up because it is important to have kind of a safe fallback.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times with early picks too is if you feel like you don't get countered, it's okay to pick any of those heroes. Like every role has a hero that can't really be countered. Tank Joanna, she really isn't countered by anyone. Solo lane Thrall, he really isn't countered by anyone. Yes, there are people who beat him in lane, but usually not that much. And
it's not like you're gonna lose the wall on the second wave because you took Thrall and he lost. Like, no, he's gonna get at worst probably a cheap parity.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like there's Raynor. He never really gets that hard countered. I mean, blinds hurt, but because he's ranged, not a lot of blinds actually hit him for very long. I think the worst blind that's ever going to hit a Raynor is probably Artanis's ult. Secondary would maybe be Joanna's blind, but Joanna's blind lasts like a second. So blinds don't hit him that long. The worst blinds are like Lily, right? But he's so far away, it's rarely gonna ever hit him. So that he's not countered that much. Jaina, same thing. Like, I guess the biggest counters to Jaina are like heavy spell armor, but she's gonna be doing camps to set up most fights. So like heavy spell armor is not gonna be that big of a deal. And you can watch for spell armor too. I mean, Anubarak, his shield is when he has spell armor. Diablo, you see the big purple spinny thing around him. And it's like, those are the things that you can look for when spell armor comes out. Spell armor is rarely like a flat thing. So those are all safe picks to pick early if you don't know what's best for the map. So priority is whatever's best for the map. Secondary is whatever doesn't get countered. Those are going to be your early picks in a draft. Now, can I preface before we get into draft at all that says picking a hero that you know in draft is going to always be better than picking a hero that you don't know? Like,
that's worth saying.
I think that's okay.
There's so many times where like I'll say something and I'll be like, oh, like Tychus is pretty good in the situation. He counters the enemies. He's got a great ult for this. And someone picks Tychus and then get in and they're like, well, so what talents do I pick? And it's like, oh no, like Tychus is not a hero that you can pick up in Storm League and be like, let's roll with it. Cause his range is so short and he gets blown up so fast because his mobility is so low outside of the one dash, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you don't pick him unless you know how to play him. And so it's better to just pick Raynor if you're used to Raynor than try to pick Tychus if he's slightly better in that situation. So when I bring up all of these, I want to make sure that people know that like you should be playing what you're best at first. But if you notice, like if your role is ranged physical damage and you notice that you're like constantly getting in these situations, it's time to expand your roster a little bit. But overall, yeah, I
think we all, like, once we get comfortable with it, a lot of us find ourselves at the precipice of that, you know, the next door to the next room of knowledge has opened up and you're like, okay, this hero in the role I like playing fulfills that role and fulfills it better for this particular scenario I found myself in. Okay, cool. That's awesome. You should be excited about that.
Yeah.
It's time to add something new to your roster. But I wouldn't stress out about it when you're trying to like build your first drafting roster. And I think that like everything you just said, just go ahead and refer back to 20 minutes ago when we were talking about have a tank, have a healer, have a solo laner, have a physical range and a spell range. Like those thoughts, that's where you go in. And you also think about your wave clear, your camp clear, your burst, your sustain, and your CC. What are you bringing? That's all what you're kind of thinking about when you're trying to figure out, well, what hero should I learn how to play before I even get into drafting?
Yeah. And so this is where I kind of want to bring up the next point, which is I always recommend that if you really want to get into this game and really enjoy it, have a main role. You can play every hero that you want, but if you have a main role, it allows you to really play the draft better because you're going to know what works and what doesn't work in your role. So I mained healer for the most seasons, so I'm going to use healer as an example. This season I've been maining solo lane, and last season I've been maining tank, but I've mained everything. But for the most part, my favorite role is healer. And let's go down the maps that you mentioned, and I'm just going to say the heroes that I would be picking for these maps and my reasons why. Alterac Pass Stukov. Stukov can last out objectives really long. People tend to get in really bad positions when they're trying to channel, which is great for you to slow them down, silence them, and take them out. Stukov would be my pick for that. Braxis Holdout, Stukov, or Lucio. They have very sustained heals. The fights tend to last a long time, and you get a lot of value out of it. Cursed Hollow, I would play Alexstrasza. You can zone people out of the objective long enough to where you get because you pop your dragon, you get about 15 seconds, the enemies either walk away or lose a fight. And if they decide to stay, they lose the fight. If they walk away, you get the objective for free. Dragonshire, Rhaegar. There's a lot of camps that have a lot of impact on that map, so I would be playing Rhaegar because I want to get those camps. The fights also tend to be very small, and because Rhaegar has really high physical damage even after the nerf, you can be really aggressive with Rhaegar in like 1v1s, 2v2s to apply a lot of pressure. So I really like Rhaegar on that map because you can like fight to win an objective really quick, or you can go and grab a couple camps and come back and win. We've got Hanamura Temple. Because the objective is kind of weak, I like to recommend instead people go for things that improve your camp clear so you can get those. But at the same time, it's kind of an open map. So you could go with really whatever you want to. I would probably go with Rhaegar again, maybe Lucio, just something very sustainy that can help out because the whole team's going to be probably going for camps at the same time. So I don't think Rhaegar is that big of a deal. And camps are kind of single target. Rhaegar really thrives in AoE camps. So probably Lucio. Infernal Shrines, Alexstrasza, or Rhaegar. Again, timed objectives mean that you don't need a lot of healing over a long period of time. You just need a lot right away because it's a timed objective. And we'll go Tomb, Tower, Volskaya. I'm not really going to get into every single one, but that's kind of what I'm looking at. I, as a healer, know the best heroes for each map based off of what the map's objective is and what I can do around it. And your role, you should have the same things. You should have if you were maining support or healer, you should have all of those heroes at a point where you feel confident playing those. And then when you get on a map, you're like, oh, this hero is good because of this, or this hero is good because of this. And you should roll with that. Now, the times that I might shift this around is that, let's say, for example, we're on Braxis. And so my options is anything that's sustain, really. I mean, you just need to be able to outlast the enemy so you can hold that point longer. Now my choices go into what does my team pick and how can I assist my team? And because, again, I'm a healer main, I should know all of this stuff. Let's say one person's like, hey, Genji's good on this map because you can do the boss really fast. And if you're a physical damage main, you should know that. So you will hover Genji. Because I'm a healer main, I don't need to know what physical damage dealers are good on this map. But because you're hovering Genji, I'm going, oh, well, Malfurion's good with Genji because I can put a heal on you. You can dash into the enemy team and I can heal you from really far away in a fight. So what you should be doing, you should only be looking at your own role and you should know every little detail of what's good on your role. Maybe you're on Braxis and Genji gets banned and someone on your team picks Jaina. And you're like, well, I can pick Ana, give you Nano Boost, and then we're going to dominate in these team fights. And so every single time, you don't need to know that Jane is good on this map or bad on this map. You just need to know what you can do in your role to do the most on this map. You first focus on the map, then you focus on your team comp, and we'll get to the mid picks when we start talking about that. But if there is a hero in your role that's great on that map, first pick it. Take it away from everyone else. Sure.
Is there anything that would be too cute? So you've been playing a lot of quick match. You've started to realize, hey, I can do these cool things on various maps. I'm gonna just shoot some at you, and you tell me too cute or practical. Mephisto lightning matches sort of the concave of the Tomb of the Spider Queen, and then I can teleport out to collect the various gems.
I think it's interesting personally. I think it's I definitely think that one's interesting. I have not thought about that at all. I would just say again, my biggest issues with Mephisto or what I've mentioned before is that he lacks a lot of those other things. If your team has it, go for it.
Rag on Braxis holdout because I'm going to lava wave the incoming Zerg wave.
So that one I think is too cute, and I'll tell you why. That you're drafting to lose. I don't like to ever draft to lose an objective. I like to draft to win an objective. It's always good to draft like to at least mitigate if you lost the objective. But Braxis is a funny map like that, where a lot of people draft a lot of wave clear when you could just draft things to win the objective. So I'm not a huge fan of that. I would rather you draft Rexar and then just hold the objective forever and never lose the objective, rather than draft Rag and go, well, if we did lose the objective, we've got this. Phoenix is kind of the best example of with that mindset of he can beat most melee heroes in the solo lane, and also he has Planet Cracker, which wipes out all of Braxis's wave. And he is used in the competitive scene. In fact, he gets banned a lot on Braxis just because of that. But yeah, I would say the Ragnaros one might be too cute.
What about Tychus? And this may play into what we just said, but Tychus, Dragonshire, because if they get a dragon, I can burn it down.
Again, too cute. There is a health cap on % health damage, and he reaches that cap really fast. So that's the only reason I would say that one's probably too cute. And again, you're drafting to lose the objective, but that's it's just something that like you should be trying to draft to win the objective, and then maybe one or two things. But as long as you have sustained damage, you have enough to. And this is where like again those 5 things usually come in to play hidden. If you have sustained damage, you can deal with the Dragon Knight. If you have burst damage, that tends to be AoE. A lot of times, you can deal with the Braxis holdout objective as well. Like you. As long as you still draft normally, you should be okay.
Kyle, I think I almost like that question when we get into mid picks and we talk about composition, because if you have another reason that you want those picks because of your composition or because of what you're going against, I think then it's a nice added bonus that in a lot of these drafting to lose scenarios, well, cool. Well, we've got a backup if we do lose the objective, but also I'm bringing synergy to the composition.
Yeah. Like Tychus for me is a hero that's like, if you have someone who can set up really well and oftentimes pull something near you, he's amazing, because bigger they are, people really underestimate how much damage that actually is. Bigger they are does about 70% of someone's health in 2 seconds. And that's anyone's health. Like that it's like 60% of the damage you're dealing is % health damage. So you're literally doing 70% of a tank's health in under 2 seconds. Like it is an it's an unreasonable amount of damage. The problem with Tychus is he's got such low range that like you need someone like a Garrosh or a Diablo to like flip them into your team. So you're like, oh, I can use my low range now safely. Boom, they're dead. And so, but that would be kind of something interesting if you did see that and you're like, hey, we're on D-Shire and we got Garrosh. Let's grab that Tychus, and you can combine those. But that's when you start getting into the late picks for sure.
I got
early picks. Oh, sure.
In these early picks, Chromie, Towers of Doom, because I'm going to poke every objective from bizarre places.
That one's perfect. So that one is actually perfect. That's exactly what I was talking about like early pick, you're drafting for the map. And one of those extra things that I said to think about, so we had the 5 and then we had the extra 4, was poke. And on maps that you have to channel an objective, getting hit by any damage, except for damage over time. The initial hit of damage over time interrupts it, but overall damage over time doesn't. It's weird. Poke does really, really well on those maps. In fact, for a long time in competitive on Towers of Doom, it's very common to see a Junkrat or a Hanzo on a team that scales well into the late game. Because if you want to make the game last as long as possible, so you can hit like level 16 or 20, you'll throw a Junkrat or a Hanzo in there to stall out the objective. In fact, there was a strategy for a while where people would run Abathur on Cursed Hollow or Towers of Doom, Soak, and they would just run straight poke heroes. And they would stall out, like Cursed Hollow's first objective would be stalled out until level 10. To give you an idea, it usually spawns around level 4. So people would stall it for 6 levels while they're waiting until they hit whatever power spike they're trying to hit. And then right at level 10, they would immediately clone like a Jaina and just go in and just blow up everyone.
So just stall till heroic is the strategy.
Pretty much. And it was just like, and so that's why, yes, Chromie on Towers of Doom, that is definitely an early pick strategy. Get something out there that can stall out objectives for a long period of time. And Chromie's a great option for that. Her W can't be blocked, and her Q has such a low cooldown. So it's like Q, you can interrupt forever. So then they have to put one person in front of you. They put one person in front of you, then you use W. And you can put her trap out there for vision. So you always know when they're channeling. You always know when they're trying to turn in. You know when whatever. It's definitely a great early pick.
Got 2 questions before we move out of early pick from the patrons here. First comes from Nam. Are there any safe opening picks dependent on league?
I think Joanna is safe in every single league. I would say, for heals, Lucio is pretty safe in every league. The only issue that I have with Lucio in very low leagues is you have no cam clear. So your team's not going to do any cams, but otherwise that's probably the safest thing. Honestly, I think in low leagues, you're pretty safe with most things for early picks. The only issue that I would have is your teams usually aren't great at counter picking. So if you really feel like you could move up in rank and you have a wide roster pool, try not to early pick at all, because low league has a lot of common heroes that are easy to counter, like Butcher. Butcher's picked a ton in low leagues. Picking a Lily after someone picks a Butcher, you pretty much just win the game. And same thing with like a couple other things. So I would say safe picks is like Joanna, just answers a lot of things, but otherwise, if you have a large roster pool, hold off as long as possible. I also recommend, if you're gonna pick something in low leagues, tell people to hover their picks. Say, hey, no judgment here, but can you guys please hover your picks? Like, I'm not gonna tell you to change. I just want to pick around what you guys are trying to pick. Because if someone hover, you have like Murky hover, and you have Nova hover, and then you have Butcher hover, and then you have what else is used in bronze right now? Kael'thas hover. You see that whole thing, you need to look at this and go, okay, I need to work around all of this that all seems terrible to work around. But I don't want to tell anyone to change, but what do we need? And that's what I would recommend if you're safe, or if you're early picking in low ranks. If you're early picking in high ranks, most people are pretty good at filling in what's needed. So pick what you're comfortable with, or if there's something good for the map, pick that. If not, safe picks or anything that you don't get countered by.
Next question from Skabooba Boobs. It's a little opinionated and a little loaded, but could you explain why people shouldn't be drafting multiple assassins with their first picks? I see this so often, and it limits ruins drafts from the starts.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest, most obvious reason is someone picks 2 physicals, you counter it with with blinds. Someone picks 2 mages, you counter it with spell armor. Like it's just the biggest thing is if you pick all of your assassins early, you can't adjust later and fix your draft that easily. Assassins tend not to be things that are that map specific. Like a lot of the big things that happen on maps are the tanks and the healers can decide a lot more than the damage. Like, I mean, picking a Rainer early, like that's all fine until like someone also picks a Grey Mane, you know? So that's the biggest issue about picking like your assassins early is that, and a lot of times like the strong meta heroes tend not to be assassins either. What I mean by that is like meta heroes are something that if there is anything that's really overpowered, it's rare that something's actually overpowered and more is perceived overpowered. But let's say that there is something that's actually overpowered, like Maiev at release or Kira at release or something like that. That's just really, really strong. Trying to pick those early is never a bad thing, but usually the meta picks are tanks. If you ever see like Diablos and Garroshes get picked up really early. Joannas get picked up really early. If the enemies ban all the tanks, then pick Joanna, like you're stuck with a tank that usually has no escape, like an Arthas, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just that like your Arthas, if you get caught by a major slow, you're stuck forever. I played against an Arthas in recent, I don't know if the video came out yet or not, but I was showing off the totem build from Rhaegar, and we banned all the tanks, picked Joanna, and then all they got was an Arthas. And every time Arthas tried to engage on us, I just dropped down a totem. And he just was slowed. He had no other engage outside of that. Every time he was running away from us, I just dropped down a totem. We killed him. It was like it was super easy to deal with, which is why it's recommended that like your early picks should be more of like the utility, the meta things, the map meta, all of that stuff first, and then your damage dealers can answer what other problems. The other thing too is like, say you pick things that just have no % health, and then they see like you did like 2 mages that are all burst, and then they're just like, all right, let's choke all. Like you have no answer to it, you know?
I mean, it really just sounds like it's coming down to that assassins are really the only thing you're guaranteed to double up on. You're
pretty much
gonna have a tank, you're gonna have a healer, you're gonna have a solo laner. You're definitely gonna have 2 damage dealers. So it's the only real risk of doubling up on the same thing.
Mm-hmm. I will also say that camp clear almost always is something that needs to be dedicated to the damage dealers, because while a lot of solo laners can do camp clear, like Malthael and like Sonya and stuff, they can do great camp clear. You can't leave your solo lane for that long. However, if you have a damage dealer like Jaina that can do a camp, it's a lot easier for one damage dealer to stay in lane and one damage dealer to go do a camp. And so if you pick 2 damage dealers right up front, neither of them can do camps, you're gimping your team because the tank can't just pick around you. There's no tank that can do camps fast enough without really gutting their build.
Yeah.
I think the best example is like Blaze can gut his build and go auto attack build, and you can do camps okay. But outside of Blaze, and then you're going a really bad build for tanking. But outside of Blaze, there are no tanks that can do camps at a reasonable pace.
It's been a big shift, I think, in the last year with Heroes of the Storm. It seemed like bruisers, like your solo laners were, you know, back in early 2018. We were still kind of looking at them to do merc camps, but just the further we've gone, the further we've gotten away from that. It's not really expected of them anymore, unless I'm playing with you, Kyle, and you're on a damage deal and you actually come and relieve me for a few minutes so I can go do mercenaries.
I'm nice like that. This is Skabooma Boots here isn't wrong though. This is kind of an epidemic because people want to play the murder machines and they want to feel awesome. So do you, in a solo environment, just force yourself in there? It'd be cool to, you know, as a tank, get to see what sort of damage dealers you're going to deal with, but you see 2 assassins hovering and you know they want to go. So pick 2 and you slam in there and make sure you don't get 2 assassins first.
I don't mind it if they're not basically identical. If they're not both physical, if they're not both spell damage, it doesn't bother me that much.
Yeah, I don't really usually mind that much. Like if they were locking in like Grey Mane and Sylvanas, I'd be like, yes, definitely. If they lock in like Raynor and Kael'thas, I'm like, yes. I don't mind that. What I mind is when it's like Li Ming and Genji and you have no camp clear, or they lock in Raynor and Greymane and you're just super susceptible to blinds. Gul'dan and Kael'thas, and then you just don't have like finishers. You get everyone low, you don't have finishers, and you don't have that much sustain against like tanks. So like stuff like that is what I'm more concerned about. I don't think this is a problem that's ever going to be solved, only because the main reason I see why people lock in really early for assassins is because they don't want to be pushed into like a support role, which brings it back to make sure you have something in every role so that when people are picking these roles, you have an answer. At the bare minimum, you can at least be confident in one role, even if you get pushed into it. And that's the biggest thing for me is when I saw like low rank games, it's always like 4 assassins lock in. And then you're playing like a tank going, what tank can also heal? You know, like I'm like, I can play Uther main tank or I can play ETC with Prog Rock. And you're just trying to figure it out really quick. And it's like that happens. It really, really does happen.
And I will say sometimes when you figure out that puzzle, you have an explosive win. Because you just end up with way more damage than the opposing team knows what to do with. But not that I'm condoning that draft, but
this happened to me 3 times in Grandmasters a couple seasons ago, where it is literally 3 seasons ago. Grandmasters, I kept getting games without a tank or a healer, and I'm last pick going, what do I pick? And the pick I kept doing was Whitemane, because the cooldown for her like armor ult was like so low at the time, and even if you got stunned, you could just drop down like an E and heal yourself for so much. But I'd usually just walk into the enemy team, pop my 40% ult, and then just W someone until I got CC'd and put an E down. It was usually with 4 assassins, it's usually long enough to where your assassins wiped everyone as long as you could survive that initial burst. So I was actually using Whitemane as a tank for like, I won 3 games with it because of that. And it was just the funniest thing, but it happens. I think in low ranks, the biggest thing is as long as you can adapt, you will win more than you lose. But you will have those games where you'll have 2 to 3 assassins lock in first. And you're just like, whatever.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to mid picks then. How do we actually build around a team composition? We're not dealing with any weird first picking. We liked it. It's locked in. It's now middle draft and we're up. What are we looking for here?
So mid pick when you're in solo queue should always revolve around picking what your team's missing. Again, you have those 5 things that you're looking for. Do you have burst damage? Do you have camp clear? If not, pick up something like Jaina who can do camps. So pick up someone like Greymane who has burst and camp clear. If you are in the tank role and you're missing CC, then pick a tank that's heavy on CC like ETC. That's what you should be looking for. Mid pick is always about completing your draft, and drafts in solo queue just need all of those things. It's chaotic enough. You don't need something perfect. You just need something good enough. And why I say that is because when we get into the coordinated play later in this, I do want to talk a little bit about like specific team comps. Like there's a variety of them, like blow up comps, wombo comps, stall comps, front to back comps. All of that is like compositions that you want to like make perfect, so you just win every fight. We don't really need to do that because fights are going to be done so inefficiently in solo queue that all you have to do is have everything and play well. And you don't need to, like, you just need those traits and play well and you're good. So solo queue, fill out what's missing. If I was to say your first 2 picks were Li Ming and Greymane, and you are playing a tank, you would see something along the lines of, okay, well, we've got a lot of burst damage. So if we can just CC something for a good enough period of time to where they can throw everything at it, that's a kill and a reset. But we don't have any CC. So I would be looking for someone who can lock someone down for a good 1 to 2 seconds. I would also look at who counters those maybe and go, well, what could I pick that not only synergizes with those, but could I take away a counter from the enemies? So if I was playing tank, I would pick a Nubarok. You've got double stuns, so you can lock someone down for a good amount of time. And who breaks your cocoon the easiest? Li Ming. so you don't have the cocoon break. Who counters Li Ming the hardest? Anubarak, because he summons a whole bunch of beetles that are going to block all of her abilities. So not only are you doing one thing that works really well with your team, but you're also taking away some counter picks for the enemy team. And you already have the counter pick missing for your team. So it's like you try to kind of pick out as many different things that you can do in the mid game. And there's a million things to look for. So don't ever feel bad if you miss something, but in general, you're looking to fill out your team. Don't work so hard on countering the enemies yet, because you can always counter them later. If they lock in Twin Blades Varian right now, you've got time. If you are mid picking and you see something on your team, this is where I like the Ana, for example. Like that's where you see like the Jaina on your team, you pick Ana. Or maybe you saw an Ana on your team, you're like, now I'm going to pick that Jaina. Like I know for sure we're going to be good in team fights. And that's where you're just trying to fill out your team.
So you're still just trying not to lose the game, essentially.
This is creating your win condition.
I love what when you brought up Twin Blaze Variant and countering it. So you're focusing on, don't get laser focused on hard counters, because you still need to just play the map. You still need to play Heroes of the Storm.
The problem I see sometimes is like people try to counter the whole way down and they have no way to win the game. You can stop the enemies from like initially winning, but if you don't have a way to actually like close out these team fights and then close out the game afterwards, you're useless. So the first
like what do you even no siege? Congrats, you won the team fight. Now what do? You nothing, because you essentially drafted 5 Malthiels and no siege damage. Congratulations.
No, it's true. And one of the biggest examples that I see this on is Battlefield of Eternity, where people will draft to like counter the enemies, and they'll draft these amazing team fight comms. They'll win the team fight, but their race is so bad that the enemies respawn and they're back in the fight, and they get a second fight while you guys have low health, low mana, low cooldowns. Then they win that fight. They only need to win 1 fight to win the race, while you guys need to win like 2 or 3 to eventually race it down. And it's like at least draft a couple things for the map first, then focus on completing your draft, and then you can go and counterpick like the 2 most important things on the enemy team.
So I got 2 scenarios for you. Let's say our early pick was Diablo and Greymane. So we know we're going in. Do I, in the mid pick, agree on the go in, or do I cover the back?
So you would want to, I mean, you could do both. Look at it. And this is the other thing too. There's not always just one right answer. If I saw Diablo and Greymane and I was playing a healer, I would always go Tyrande. And my reasoning for it is Diablo slams against a wall. What does Diablo always do after he slams against a wall? He flips.
Pick somebody up.
He flips. So you always throw a stun behind him, and you always lower their armor before the stun lands. And then Greymane only needs to do QEQ and they're dead. And that's it. And like, so I would look at that and I would go, we just made a blow up comp with those 3 heroes. And we can always blow up one person. Yes, if the enemies have dive, but we might not know that in the draft yet. So we don't need to counter the enemy's dive yet. We just don't know. So we still want to be working on what our comp does to make sure that it actually does it. And if that's what was picked, that Diablo and Greymane, I'd be like, okay, well, if I'm playing support, I'm going to do that. If I'm playing solo lane, what might be are we lacking anything in this team that maybe I could fill in with the solo lane? Say, so far that's all physical damage, so I might pick a solo laner that has a little bit more magic damage or spell damage. I think maybe a Thrall.
I'll just Jaina. I'll be stoked. I'll clear waves.
Yeah, if you're playing the other assassin role, go Jaina. Diablo slams, flips. There's a Blizzard sitting there waiting for that flipped person. And not just that, but there's also like APOC and Ring. If one lands, the other one's guaranteed to land, which is kind of nice. So there's a lot of like little things you can do. In every single role, I would be looking to complete the team first. And I personally think that a completed team only ever needs 3 people. Like any sort of team fight combo only ever needs 3 people. A lot of people overthink it. Like they'll show like a wombo combo. We'll see something on Reddit where like someone like hits a graviton, or someone like goes off and they do a a void prison to lock down 5 people, and they throw a graviton and turn off the void prison. Everyone's stuck in the graviton, and then they go up in Twilight Dream, and then they go up and hit them with a planet cracker, and they hit them with like all 5 members participate. But at the end of the day, if you land a void prison and an APOC and you have a regular team comp, you win the fight. Really, you don't need anything else other than those 2. If you have a taunt into a Tron to stun into a Jaina, that person's dead and everything else is overkill. You only ever really need 3 people for any major team combo or team comp. The rest is just filling in either the wave clear, camp clear if you need that, or filling in counter picks for the enemy team. And that's why the first 3 picks of your team should always be, how do we win this? And let's make sure that it works.
Another scenario for you, and this may matter less than it used to because games almost always reach these 20-minute marks in solo. But let's say we have a Nazeebo and a Zul'jin as our early picks. Do I, as tank or support, think of myself as a late game hero, or do I fill out the early game?
That's a tricky one. I think the big thought process for Nazeebo half the time is like, is there any way we can like force this? That's the only time you do draft to lose objectives, honestly. And it's like, that's a great example of like, oh, we've got a Nazeebo, let's throw a Ragnaros in there so we can survive objectives that we lose. Forcing the game to get to level 20. But at the same time, it's up to you. You could try to play an earlier game and play something that's got a really strong early game just to dominate. But yeah, that's where you decide what you want to do with the team. If someone first picks an Nazeebo and we're on Tomb of the Spider Queen, I'm picking Ragnaros. And then I'm just going to press trade every time that the objective comes in, lava wave, slow everything down. Usually you'll only lose like a couple forts before you hit 20. But yeah, that's up to you. Early game heroes, I think that's the part that's kind of confusing about HOTS, though, is early game heroes I feel like are a little bit more subtle now than they were before, because all the scaling isn't really shown. So like if I say Zagara is an early game hero, people might be like, well, why? Well, because her scaling is kind of weird now. She has a lot of value in the early game. Her scaling's not great. So she's more of an early game hero. Twin Blades is more of an early game hero a lot of times because fights tend to happen faster at 20, and you want these long fights where you can just sit there and auto attack and heal forever. But level 20 ultimate abilities usually close out fights really quickly. One Silence and Tomb, a couple people are dead, so you don't really get time to just sit and auto attack anymore. So there are heroes, but it's very subtle to know what's early game or late game. I would say don't focus on it. I would say if you want to stall out the game, you can pick like Ragnaros with a Nazeebo, or just don't worry about it. Imagine him as just a slow damage mage and let him do his thing.
Another one in this vein, and this came from our patron, Adanya. How important is it to pick heroes that attack the same target? So in their example, they have a Tychus that is wailing on the front line. Let's say alongside that, you drafted a Zarya. You know, a little weird in the early picks, but Zarya, Tychus, both are going to be targeting what's in their face.
Mm-hmm.
Do I now join that what's in their face battle, or should I pick something that pressures another part of the team?
So that's where the team comps gets a little bit more important for like a 5-man group. I would say you should probably be focusing on what your team's attacking in solo queue. In a 5-man group, attacking the tanks first is a team comp called front to back. Which kind of is self-explanatory. You're killing the things that are in the front, and then you're making your way to the things in the back. But in this, yeah, I mean, if your mage throws all of their resources out on the front thing, you're going to want to do the same, because if not, your mage isn't going to be able to do any more damage. And usually when that happens, it means that your team just isn't safe enough to go and hit their backline. Same thing with auto attackers. It's safe to have an auto attacker attack a tank the entire time. If the enemy tank's not good, the auto attacker can do 70% of the tank's health very quickly. And if you're playing a mage, you can only throw your stuff out once, and your auto attacker's already gotten it down to like 30% health, you throw it out on the tank, so you at least secure that kill. Securing kills is very, very underrated, to the point I always tell people I'm never upset whenever I'm coaching and someone uses a what's it called? Like a major ult, like a sundering. Like there's a kill you were gonna get, and someone uses a sundering to just make sure you get it. I'm never upset about that. I'm never like, if something dies, that means that you usually get something out of it. Like if your team gets a kill, you get something. If everyone uses every ult and you kill two people, even if you only kill one person, they don't want to walk into a 4v5 even though you've used every ult. So you'll usually win the objective. So I'm okay with overkill 99% of the time. Which is why I think you should always be focusing on the targets that your team is focusing on, even if it seems like targets you shouldn't be focusing on. There's very few exceptions where like their tank is just walking through you. That usually, if you can't kill their tank, you usually draft it without sustained damage, and that's where you lost in draft rather than you lost in the game. So I would say you don't need to pick things that are always attacking the same. Like even if you're playing Genji and you have a Tychus, just attack their tank and just get the reset off their tank, and then you can start diving into their backline. Or if you guys already have enough to deal with their backline. But yeah, if you're gonna draft like a dive comp, then you're gonna want to commit to it. But in solo queue, draft what you feel is right. And if you really don't have enough damage to finish off tanks, that's on you. If your Tychus can only do 70% of someone's health, you need to draft someone who can do that last 30.
I like that answer a lot.
Well put.
Before we go into late picks, there is a second ban phase. Is there anything you recommend happens in that phase?
So because the next piece is picking things that are counter picks, you normally want to ban what is your counter, but you can also ban what they haven't picked yet. So the two roles that get choked out the easiest, and I guess that's kind of a weird term for it, but that's essentially what they call it, is when you have not enough like heroes to pick, is tanks and healers. There's just not a lot of them. And usually in any given role, half of the roster is usually meta or viable, and the other half of the meta is usually niche. So what you want to do is you want to ban the roles that are niche, and ban out everything that's not going to be that, or that's going to be good on that map that they just haven't picked. So if they haven't picked a tank by the second ban phase, you normally want to ban a tank. If they haven't picked a healer by the second ban phase, you want to ban a healer. If not, you ban whatever's going to be the counter pick to what you've already showed and what you've already picked. Say you picked that Kel'Thuzad early, and you're looking at it going, what's going to be the biggest counter for us playing Kel'Thuzad? Is it going to be the Kharazim? Is it going to be the Medivh? Is it going to be whatever? And you want to try to ban the thing that's going to counter pick you. Or if they just really haven't picked their utility stuff yet, take another piece away from them. Try to bottleneck or choke out their picks a little bit.
All right. And now the final part of this discussion, late picks.
This is pretty much either things that you don't ever want to get counterpicked, like picks that are easily counterpicked, like a Twin Blades variant, or you pick things to counterpick the enemy team. That's purely what the late picks are. You don't really want to be trying to fix your draft in the late, because you're usually down to very few pieces, not just because they've taken stuff and they banned stuff, but because you might have already had a lot of roles taken. If solo lanes already picked, if healers already picked, if tanks already picked, and they pick something that counters your healer. Say you've got an Uther healer, and then they pick like a Lunara or something that's going to be melting down everyone faster than Uther can keep up. You're sitting there going, now the only way to answer this is a second healer, and we also still don't have enough wave clear. You don't want to be fixing your team in the last couple picks because your roles are limited. Same thing, if you're stuck to healer and they picked Rhaegar and you guys have no camp clear, you're done. No other healer can do camps as really efficiently. So you're just done. And that's why you don't want to be correcting anything at this point. You want your major team comp to be done. And this is where you just pick whatever counters the enemies. And every role has counter picks, but some of them are a little bit harder to do at this point, which is why I usually recommend solo lane be the last pick, because solo lane has the widest roster pool, and solo lane is the worst if counter picked. So if you're on Braxis and you pick Illidan as your solo laner, they could just throw heavy blinds up there and you won't be able to do anything. And then you just forever lose the objective and you just lose the game, which is why you want to try to have your solo lane picked as late as possible. And you use it to answer as many things as you can in one go. If you're not on Braxis and not on Dragonshire, it's the world's your oyster, honestly, on what you pick in the soul lane. They have double tank, you do things that melt down tanks. They've got double heals, you do things that turn off healing. I mean, their soul lane has it all. They really, really do. So I recommend having soul lane be late, and then otherwise just counterpick with whatever your role can actually do.
So why do I keep finding myself first picking Rexar in so many games?
I mean, Rexar is also just a contested pick.
No one wants to.
Yeah.
No one wants to. No one wants a first pick in my games right now.
That's why I tell people to hover picks, and then I just tell someone to first pick. Because if you tell people to hover and then you go, I think Sylve will be good to pick first, and they pick Sylve, it's like then they feel more confident because someone else kind of told them to do it, and they still get to play the hero that they wanted to play.
Oh yeah, get stoked on it too. Like, oh, Sylve would be boss here, man. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like, oh yeah,
like, oh man, if you lock Sylvan right now, we win this game. Like, you do stuff like that, and you're good. So that's what I really like about like telling people to hover, and I can't stress that enough. Just be like, hey, can we get some hovers? And most people hover their picks, and even if they're ridiculous, don't trash people for it. Someone hovers Murky. Most of the people that I see hover Murky with confidence, I check their win rate. It's like 65%. I'm like, you are gonna play Murky. Well, and I'm going to let you play Murky.
The beginning of this year, I was saying that with Novas. I just kept ending up in games with Novas that were bosses. I was like, all right, I don't get mad at Nova picks anymore. Apparently, that's a word I found myself in. I haven't seen it lately, but.
I just let people play their weird picks sometimes because I'm like, if you're confident with this weird pick, people might not know how to play against it. You see a good Nova or good Murky, nobody's going to know how to play against it because people are so mad at those that they don't let them ever go on their team, that when you actually play against a good one, you're like, I don't know what to do against this. So yeah, I mean, focus on counter picks or strange picks that are easily countered or things that might be surprises. That's all that you leave for the late picks. Scenarios that you would be looking for is like the things that you'd be afraid of on your team to be picked early. Double physical damage, that's when you start picking blinds. If you're in the assassin role, you can pick Cassia. If you're in the tank role, you can pick Joanna. You can pick Arthas. If you're in a soul lane role, you can pick Artanis. You can pick Arthas. If you're in the support role, you can pick Lily, right? Those are all the things that you're going to be wanting to look at if they go double physical damage. If they go double spell damage, if you're in the tank role, you want to be picking a Nubrak. You want to be picking Diablo. If you're in the solo role against double spell damage, Blaze can turn off 40% of their spell damage. He can reduce spell damage with his level 16 talents. If you're in the support role, Brightwing can reduce spell damage by a certain amount with her E. And you also have, honestly, spell damage tends to just be burst. So if you can just do anything to keep people, or poke, you just sustained healing is really nice. But yeah, that's kind of what you'd be looking for with things like that. Is say they've got triple frontline, double tank, triple frontline or something. Ragnaros Q does a lot of damage after 16. You get a Q every 2 seconds, melting them, reducing their health by 9% every time you use Q. You've got Malthael, melts through them. Both of those are in the soul lane. If you're in the mage role, you're going to be using like Kael'thas to do burn flesh at level 7, right, to melt down the tanks. If you're against again triple tanks and you're playing the healing role, sustain usually is the best answer for that, just because tanks normally will run out of mana before they can kill anything, as long as you can keep everyone up. But if you really want to go crazy with it and you just want to have some fun, go Rexar and just go full W build, and then just like it'll stack up so quickly because there's just so many bodies there that you'll actually melt people down really quickly. let's say double heals against the enemy team. You're playing healers. You've got Deckard, you've got Ana. Both can reduce healing. Say you're in the assassin role and you need to deal with double heals. You go burst, because if you can burst them down, they can't react fast enough to heal. If you're in the tank role, you go with heavy CC. If you can lock down their whole team, they can't heal. And if you're in the solo lane, there's answers to double heals with Malthael turning off healing with Touch of Death, I believe is what it's called at level 7. And you also have like Varian, you can go Twin Blades in the solo lane and just reduce healing with Mortal Strike. So there's answers to just about anything in any role if you're willing to get creative.
That's a lot of answers. That's awesome, though, that there is an opportunity across all the roles to do that sort of thing. We did get a particular question about countering Asmodan. The enemy team is pretty like general. It's for the map, maybe. And the one thing they're concerned about is an enemy Asmodan. How do you go about maybe making your team more resilient to that?
Yeah, I mean, the higher rank you get, Asmodan plays completely different. So in low rank, he just throws those giant balls, right? Just it deals a lot of damage. The biggest way to counter if your team doesn't really know what they're doing, if you are in draft, they pick an Asmodan, you're going to be looking for ways to mitigate damage on a lot of people that are going to be still in the area, or heavy sustained healing. He only does poke damage in that build. He just does a lot of poke damage. But say you're playing Lucio, he throws out a Q that does a good chunk of everyone's health. You just walk up and press E, and now everyone's back to full health again, and he has nothing left, and that's it. I mean, like, so I think if you're playing like a healer, that's all you do. If you're playing a tank, you can be disruptive to him. If you're playing a soul laner, feel free to try out like maybe Zarya in the solo lane. I know it sounds a little weird, but that's actually what I did for when he was actually overpowered. Because you got to remember, after he got reworked, he's gotten like 12 nerfs. And when he was overpowered, I just picked Zarya in the solo lane, and I would just put a shield on whoever was still in the thing. Not only does that save them, it also instantly filled up my energy. So then I just melted their entire team. So I would do that. But these days, he's not as scary as he used to be. And in fact, in high ranks, people are so good at leaving the areas because, again, we even got the movement speed buff. It's just people just walk out of it. So the Asmodans in like Masters don't even use Q like at all. They literally just don't. They just, when the objective spawns, they go to the opposite side of the map and they just go a full summoner build, summon a whole bunch of stuff and take a fort before you even get the first part of that objective. I mean, like Infernal Shrines is the funniest example of it. Say Infernal Shrine spawns on the top, and you have an Asmodan that's level 10 down at the bottom. By the time you get 10, he's already taken your fort. And if you leave him there, by the time you get the objective, he takes your keep. That's where he's played these days. So if you're in low ranks and dealing with an Asmodan, try to do sustained healing or try to do damage mitigation in some way. If you're playing tank, go like Tyrael, just give shields to people. If you're playing solo lane, go Zarya or Tyrael. Give shields to people. If you're playing support, go sustained, or heals, go sustain. If you're playing damage and you already have a lot of damage, you could throw in a Tassadar. Like if you have a sustained damage dealer, you can throw in a Tassadar and put a shield on someone. But if you're playing against him in high ranks, play things with globals so you can kill all of his minions that he summons and then global to the objective so you can win the objective as well. So it's a tough hero to answer because in different ranks he's played very differently. And again, the globals are usually in the solo lane too. So try to have your solo lane pick late because if you need to counter an Asmodan in Masters, you're going to want a Haka or an ETC or a Falstad or something like that.
So as we are nearing the end here of this discussion of drafting solo, any final thoughts? Kyle, I'll throw to you.
I mean, I think this is great because it gave us so much focus on those late picks, and everything before that is way more simple than we make it out to be. It's about filling those 9 roles NotParadox mentioned, making sure we have the core 5 roles or so to have a functional team. And I've been in that battlefield scenario as well, where we win every team fight but can't do anything. So leading with the map picks into filling out the team. And then at the end, when we have the whole picture, we put it together into any sort of counter draft or final bans or final picks.
Paradox, anything to leave on?
I want to pressure the point of, if you don't have a big roster, focus on the heroes you're good at first. Now, feel free to learn heroes in Unranked, but when you're in Storm League and you don't play a lot of Arthas and they pick like all auto attackers, I mean, Arthas isn't too difficult to pick up on the fly, but you're just usually going to do better with heroes that you're good with. And that's the biggest thing, is if you guys are new players, focus on the heroes you know first and then worry about everything else. And that's also why I recommend, usually if you're playing like one hero all the time, try to pick it earlier so people work around you, or hover it earlier. If it's something that gets counterpicked, like say you only play Twin Blades Variant, which if you're that guy, I mean, come on, no. But if you only play Twin Blades Variant, like tell your team ahead of time. Just say, hey, I have a 62% win rate Twin Blades Variant. I would like to play this, but I need to last pick it. Can you guys work around that a little bit? And some people will do it, but the lower rank you are, the less likely people are going to know what to do to work around you, or even care enough to do that. Which is why
you also may
have
not
an open roster
to work around you, because they may not.
Yeah, sometimes that's pretty bad. Like I found so Abathur is one of like my main hero. Point that I get Abathur permanently banned against me in high ranks. When I get in low ranks, someone will see my name, they're like, you should play Abathur, and I'm like, no. Like you guys just don't know how to draft around Abathur, and it's just not worth it for me to try to teach it in draft right now. This is something for more coordinated teams, or people because people overthink it, right? Like I'll pick Abathur and someone will be like, oh, well, I'm going to do Hammer so you can give me 25% attack speed. I'm like, I don't even take that talent. And so what's in their idea of how to work around the hero versus what you do, unless there's something that you just want someone to pick, tell them, but otherwise don't try to let them draft around you. You could just say, hey, I'm going to pick Vary in the solo lane, but we will need some wave clear and camp clear or something to that sort. And then just let people know. But otherwise, I would say priority heroes that you're good at until you have a big roster, and then everything that we said today.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time, Paradox, and hope everyone found this enlightening. We will be back to talk about drafting in a coordinated environment, but for now, we're going to end it here. As always, you can support the show over at patreon.com/ITN. A lot of the questions today came from that patron Discord, which is one of the perks you'll get by supporting our program, no matter what level of pledge you have decided to send to the show. So we would really appreciate it if you head on over to patreon.com/ITN and consider supporting the program. Again, thanks to our producers, Declan H, Cheesy Bob, Chris K, and Robert M. NotParadox, as our returning guest for this episode, where can everybody find you?
So I was dumb, didn't get my thing on everything, so it's all different places. I recommend just googling NotParadox. You'll find all my Twitter and all that stuff. But I do want to do like a mini shout out this upcoming month. If you aren't following on my YouTube, I recently took a weekend. I got placed low, got some decay, and I took a weekend to get back to Masters. Took 2 days. I'm doing guides on every single hero that I use to get back to Masters. And those are all scheduled throughout the month. All of October, you'll be seeing guides of what heroes I recommend for carrying in every single role. So I would recommend following my youtube.com/NotParadox. And thank you guys again for having me on. I appreciate it.
We appreciate you coming back. Kyle, what about you, buddy?
You can find me over at twitch.tv/Kyle Fergusson, where things are going to slowly turn back online. KyleFergusson.com. as solo shows begin flowing.
Ooh.
Nice. I'm Garrett Art on Twitter. All the podcasts can be found at amove.tv. And when I'm done traveling, you can find me streaming World of Warcraft Classic in the mornings, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, over at twitch.tv/amovetv every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But if you're listening to this the week this episode came out, I'm currently traveling, and there's no stream this Friday. But it's coming back very, very soon. That's going to wrap it up for this episode. Thank you again, everybody, for listening. Thank you for supporting us on Patreon. And until next time, good luck and have fun.
Take care.